here, I want to today talk a little bit about how we can use the very start process of your interaction as a hypnotherapist. And we're going to look at this in regards to what we call the hypnotic interview. Now, the hypnotic interview stage can tend to happen before the initial induction. It can tend to happen before you even start the therapy. And what this is doing is starting to explore the problem. It's starting to reveal parts of the problem where a client is either confused or the thinking process around the problem is a little bit distinted. So what we want to do in this process as regards to having an interview with a client is to basically find out what they want to work through and finding out leverage points. But something tends to happen, whether it's been taught this way or just the idea we have in the back of our mind as a hypnotherapist, is that the interview process is just the interview. It's just about finding out what the problem is, whether it's a client saying, I need to stop smoking, or I need to lose weight, or I need to get past this anxiety, or I have a fear of dogs, or I have a major phobia, whatever the case may be. And then what happens with all that information is the therapist will put all that aside and then move on to the next part of their session, which is generally the induction. What I want to present to you today is how we can actually use what comes out of that interview and have it become a part of the induction. What can tend to happen from hypnotist to hypnotist is we tend to divide up our sessions. We tend to say this is the interview. Once that's done, then we move over into the induction. Once that's done, we do the deepener for some cases. Then we move into the therapy. Then we move into testing and trance. And that's the clinical format, the more classical format of how a hypnotherapist would run their session. But what I want to reveal to you today is some little covert secrets, if you will, or some hints and tips to take what you're doing currently and speed up the process, and actually how to integrate all these steps together so they become one fluid conversation. Now, this is working in regards to conversational hypnosis. The more clinical format may fit for some clients, but we're just going to work specifically with conversational hypnosis. So what I want to look at is how can we use this interview to work towards an outcome in regards to therapy? How can we use all the vital information we get from this interview in regards to actually helping our client break through the issue that they've come in to see us for? So when we're interviewing a client, well, the first thing I want to make very clear, it does not matter how you start. This can tend to be one of the biggest blocks as a hypnotist, especially a question that I get asked a lot is, I don't know where to start. Which part do I begin at? Do I do the induction first? Do I do this part first? Do I do that part first? And it really doesn't matter. Something we often tell our students is, as long as you start somewhere, the conversation has begun. And it doesn't really matter what question you ask first or what format you follow. As long as you've begun, this will lead into continuing through the conversation. This will start the interaction, because as a hypnotist, all we need to know is where to start. We don't have to be thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, because if we do, we can tend to get rather confused. The session will be a little bit pear-shaped in regards to actually solving the problem, and the therapist can become as lost as the client is. Because remember, when your client comes to see you with an issue, they're lost on how to solve it. They probably tried many things before coming to see you, and they're lost. So we are there. We are there to help open up thinking and to show them what's possible. So let's say your first interview question was as simple as, what's the problem? Your client's going to say, well, I have this issue, I need to get through it. Your follow-up question may be, when and where does it happen? A question after that might be, how do you feel about it? A question after that might be, how do you want to feel about it? And these are general interview questions, even if it's NLP or it's life coaching or hypnosis. It really doesn't matter. But what happens is a hypnotist misses out on some vital clues right now. And I run foul of this when I was a young therapist working my way up into the industry until I realized something important. When you're often asking a client a question, we tend to not really pay attention to what's being said. We either take on the information and take it purely as information, and that's it. But what we're missing out on is what we call unconscious communication compared to conscious communication. Now, as a hypnotist, we know that a client is going to solve the issue unconsciously. They don't solve the issue unconsciously. That conflict that is continuing between the conscious and the unconscious will continue outside of the session, which means a client will continue to smoke, or a client won't get over their weight loss issues or won't get past their anxiety. So with that case in mind, and a lot of hypnotists know this, we need to have full trust in the unconscious. So a thought to have in the back of your minds is, when you're talking to your client or interviewing your client about what the questions are, why not decipher between what is conscious information and unconscious information. Now, knowing that we need to fix our client unconsciously first, do we really need to worry about conscious information that comes out? Something to think about. What we want to do instead is learn how to hear unconscious communication compared to how to hear conscious communication. We need to decipher between the two. So what is conscious communication? Well, conscious communication usually comes out without any thought. You say to a client, what's the problem? And they just say, I want to quit smoking. If there's no thought in that, we would say that that's a conscious conclusion to what the problem is. But the same question can be asked, like, what is the problem, or what do you want to work through? And a client spends 10, 15 seconds thinking about it, and then they come out with a response. Now, I'm not really interested, or we are not really interested in the response, because it's going to be a normal response they always tell people, like, I need to quit, or I want to do this for health reasons, and so on and so forth. What I'm more curious about is what happened right before that. It was that part of time when they were thinking thoroughly before they answered. And by doing this and noticing this deep thinking, you're actually doing something very covert and very sophisticated as a conversational hypnotist. This process of thinking, and you might see them look off into the distance, you might see their eyes glaze over a little bit, this is an unconscious moment. So what's happening is a client is having to recover information at an unconscious level because of the context of the question, or the way you've asked the question, or just the context of actually being in a hypnotist's office. While they're going finding this unconscious information, we could say that our client is going into trance. So what I want you to keep an eye on is, even if it's your first, second, or third question, is the answer coming off the top of your client's head without any thinking? And if it is, I want you to sort of discard that information. And I want you to keep on asking whatever questions you have in mind. You might even have 30 questions that you normally ask a client. What I'm more curious about is, where do they recover that information? Do they have to really think about it? Do they really have to sort of go inside to get that information? Does sometimes the information comes out and it surprises your client? Sometimes when the information comes out, you'll see some trance cues following. You'll see some more unconscious moments following. And this is what's important to know as a conversational hypnotist. It's what is happening during that thinking stage. And what we want to do as a hypnotist is follow those unconscious moments. It's very, very simple. If we're seeing those unconscious moments, it means that we're getting information from the unconscious that's going to give us clues, hints, leverage, and emotional constructs of the problem that's going to help get resolved later. Whereas conscious information, we can't really use. If we were just changing our clients consciously, well, our job would be very easy because there wouldn't be much exploring to do, but the results would be very, very small in regards to working with clients and overcoming issues. So what we want to do is follow or track those unconscious moments. So let's say we ask a client, what do you want to work through? And they think about it for 10 or 15 seconds. Then they answer it. And then you find you ask another question, and they go back inside and they think about it, and they think about it for longer. And you do this again, and that thinking process gets longer and longer and longer, till all of a sudden you find your client not being able to speak much, or spending more time really considering your questions. Because what's happening is, the more they think, the more they uncover this unconscious information, the more they have to go inside their unconscious mind, the harder it is to come out. We can look at this almost as putting a client into trance, bringing them out, putting a client into trance, bringing them out. And each time they come out of trance, they'll never come out completely all the way. We look at this as a type of fractionation, if you will, where we put a client into trance, we get them to open their eyes, close their eyes, open their eyes. This is a classical way to do a fractionation. But we can do this in the interview stage. So you're doing something very sneaky here by uncovering leverage, by actually asking a client to really consider a question and go more unconscious to give us an answer. You're covertly putting your clients into trance. So let's say you've asked half a dozen questions. By the 6th or 7th question, you're going to find a lot of things starting to occur. You'll find your client getting a little bit slow to answer. You might see them rapidly starting to blink. You might see them starting to relax. You might see them getting more confused with each question. Now, the questions may seem very simple, but it's going to get very hard for them to answer consciously. And the more unconscious information comes out, the almost bizarre the answers are going to be. And this is a great thing. So my advice here is to not deal with the conscious mind. If you want to put a client into trance very, very quickly, follow the unconscious information. If you find that you ask a question, your client thinks, and then the next question that comes off the top of their head, maybe consider going back to that first question and just exploring that a little bit more. The more you can track your client and keep them in more of the unconscious land, the more covertly you're putting them into trance. So that's all for now. During your interview stage, watch out for these unconscious moments. Don't think I've got to do the interview, then do the induction. This interview becomes a part of the induction. The great thing about it, your client will have no idea what's occurring. They'll just think it's part of the process to find out about the problem. And before they know it, they're going to be in trance and you're halfway done during your session. Now, keeping your client in trance, that's a different story altogether, and we'll get to that in another video. It's putting a client into trance as quickly as possible so you can get more unconscious information and more leverage points from the unconscious mind, and it can start to resolve the issue quicker. So that's all for now. Again, my name is Scott Jansen. Adopt that into your practice or add to what you're doing already, and I look forward to hearing about your results. Bye for now.